After the recent remakes, it's time for a completely new entry in the series. In this latest Resident Evil game, we control Leon and Grace. Before the release, I didn't know anything else about this game. I didn't watch any trailers or read any news. What are my completely unbiased thoughts? Did anything surprise me? Or did it turn out to be just average? I'm Uncle Bob and welcome to my spoiler-free review. The last new Resident Evil game I played that wasn't a remake was Resident Evil 6. I played through Resident Evil 7 on YouTube, and Resident Evil 8 hasn't drawn me in yet. So what tempted me to buy this title, since I hadn't even watched the trailers and wasn't hyped about it? Leon. The return of an old character. I've played through the second and fourth parts at least a few times each, so I was curious to see how my old friend was doing. Besides, I was hoping for a cool, engaging story. And in terms of gameplay, I was hoping for something close to Resident Evil 4. Were my expectations met? For the most part, yes. We start the game as Grace, a scatterbrained FBI agent, who is assigned by her boss to investigate the case of yet another mysteriously dead body. For some reason, she has a trauma related to the location where the body was found, but we soon learn the reason why. Intriguing at first, questions arise who, what, and why. We discover everything over time, although you can figure out a few things on your own rather quickly. Grace's story is generally cool. While I didn't experience any major plot twists, I got hooked on following her journey. The plot itself is coherent and above all, interesting. The second character is Leon, who has taken down more than a few monsters. Hardly anything makes an impression on him, and he's clearly tired of life. His story is less complex, if not completely straightforward. We have a specific task. We're looking for a guy and trying once again to save the world from the bad guys. In this regard, I had a slight feeling like I was playing Leon's campaign from Resident Evil 6 with a little bit of Resident Evil 4 mixed in. It's not that it's bad, but for me it's a bit too one-dimensional. Overall, story-wise, I'd say the whole game is okay, nothing spectacular, with one small plot twist that won't leave you speechless, but it's enjoyable to play and watch the cutscenes. The game begins in a hotel. This serves as the opening to Grace's story. We quickly arrive at the medical facility, and this is where the gameplay truly begins. The same formula we've known since the very beginning of the series is used here. We have a large building with plenty of rooms, and we are searching for several keys to open the main passage, in this case, the exit from the building. I personally like this setup. We unlock doors and explore more corridors, then return to the main lobby with a bunch of new keys in hand. Of course, this might not appeal to everyone, and what's more, experiencing it again in the newest game, and on top of that, we encounter this same pattern twice here. Without spoiling anything, I just say that after leaving the facility, we end up in a certain place where the same trick is used. Once again we search for a bunch of keys to open the passage ahead. After leaving this location for good, we have a linear map for the rest of the game, which leads us through various locations with frequently changing scenery. Overall, I rate the created world very highly. The facility is incredibly atmospheric. We have moldy basements, lavish ballrooms, doctors' offices, surgery rooms, kitchens, and storage rooms. There's no monotony of four white walls. The situation is a bit different once you leave the facility. The next hub where we look for keys is... It has its own theme. In a way, it's repetitive, but the developers did their best to spice up the stage, and I think they did a good job. Though it's still monotonous. Everywhere we look, we see the same walls bathed in the same colors. And I know this sounds like a major boring downside, but it makes perfect sense for this location, and in a way, I still felt a breath of fresh air. What's more, I had just as much fun here as I did at the facility, with an added touch of curiosity. Let's move on to the technical side, starting with the camera. By default, we watch Leon's actions from behind him, and when controlling Grace, we see the world through her eyes. The game has a really cool option to freely switch the view from first person to third person, and vice versa. We can customize this aspect to our liking. I think more games should offer this option. It's a cool feature. I enjoyed playing as Grace in both camera settings, but with Leon, the first person view didn't quite suit me. Since his gameplay is action oriented and I kept missing what was happening on the sides. It's an obvious natural limitation, but I had the impression that I was playing on an unfinished mode, and that the game itself was designed specifically for the third person view. Just a strange feeling I had, specific to Leon. The game runs on the same graphics engine as the latest titles in the series. I played on maximum settings with all reflections and other visual effects enabled. In my opinion, it's playable and runs well, and my computer specs are listed in the description of this video. By the way, this is right at the start of the game, when you're walking down the street and it's raining. I get the impression that this part was heavily polished with fancy effects, because later in the game it kind of fades away. There isn't such an overwhelming numbers of reflections, light rays and other visual fireworks. Of course the graphics are still great. Just yesterday, when I was playing, I paused and thought to myself, this looks amazing. And now for what I consider the most important aspect of games, gameplay. Playing as Grace is more about sneaking through the shadows and solving puzzles, than taking out hordes of zombies. She doesn't have the same firepower as Leon, so you have to focus on stealth kills or making a quick escape. Her arsenal is very slim, so if you're expecting a lot of variety, you'll be disappointed, as she's been given a minimalist set of tools for murder. I'm talking about puzzles, and unfortunately it's the usual fare. A collection of keys and locks that you have to open in a specific order. There aren't any more complex logic puzzles, which is a shame. From the classics I like the puzzle from Resident Evil 3 with the music boxes, where you had to arrange the plugs correctly so the melody would play without any off-key notes. There are no similar puzzles in this game, which I regret. Leon's gameplay. If you've played Resident Evil 4, you know how it goes. You run and shoot, find a key, pull a lever, and wait for the passage to open, all while taking out the undead. You can feel the difference in power between Leon and Grace. Leon has a more varied and powerful arsenal, although I am not entirely satisfied with the number of weapons. In Resident Evil 4, there was plenty to shoot with several weapons of every type, plus inventions like a mine launcher. Here we have two types of toys from each category, and on top of that I consider the carabines to be some kind of mistake. I feel unsatisfied. I don't remember if it was like in the fourth part, but definitely the fifth. When you max out the first weapons, it unlocks additional guns. Here that's not the case. The upgrades are what they are, basic stat boosts, and we don't find any new parts for modifications, except for two, literally two things. A sniper scope and a muzzle brake for a pistol. I was also disappointed with the weapon attachments. Above all, I was hoping for more of them. But instead we got one or at most two attachments per weapon, and that's it. Leon can also finish off downed enemies, and silently take out zombies. When you sneak up from behind, one swing of the axe and the zombie is done for. Everything is shown in a pretty gory way. Flying heads are a common sight. This is probably the most brutal Resident Evil in the series. I say probably because I don't know what it's like in Resident Evil 8. When an enemy explodes, blood splatter all over the room. And our characters die by being sawed in half or torn apart. They're eaten and dismembered. Mortal Kombat wouldn't be ashamed of some of these scenes. Overall, the game is a lot of fun to play. It's a really great game. But I think that by combining systems from Resident Evil 7 with older entries, Requiem didn't fully reach its potential. It wants to be everything, but it's nothing specific. What do I mean? Let me explain. From Resident Evil 7 I just mentioned, the game uses a coin system where you pay with coins for upgrades and resources. Okay, I have absolutely nothing against that, but I feel like this feature is underutilized, and that's because we only have 4 storage lockers to open, and that's it. I was hoping we'd find another room with more lockers later on, but unfortunately that didn't happen. The same goes for the currency system in Leon's game. We earn points that we can use to buy new weapons and upgrade the ones we already have. But as I mentioned earlier, there isn't a huge variety of weapons in the game, so there isn't much to buy. And we only have 2 upgrade levels for each part. We can unlock a 3rd level, but that doesn't change much. There's simply nothing cool to spend those points on. In Resident Evil 4, I'd jump for joy whenever I met a merchant, because I was curious about what new weapons he had for sale. Here, seeing the shopping chest, I knew I only spent my money on increasing firepower. The experience was completely emotionless and flat. Using the shopping and coin systems, I felt like I was playing a demo version where most of the interesting stuff is unavailable. Except this is reality, and these features are only shallowly presented. And since I'm in a complaining mood, I will mention without spoiling anything the main antagonist of this game. At the beginning, we meet a strange guy. It's a bit intriguing to wonder what his secret, history and motives are, or if he's hiding something hideous under his mask. And I say, I was hoping for something different. Later, the situation changes a bit, and there's just a bad guy, and that's it. It's hard to say more without giving anything away, but the story and motives of the villain in this part are as blunt as a watered-down drink. The use of the antagonist itself is symbolic. I'd say it's been better. From a nitpicker's perspective, I also mentioned the character's movement. Grace runs at a snail's speed, and at first I kept checking to make sure I was holding down the shift key to move faster. With Leon, another thing annoyed me more, specifically the way he gets ready to run, especially right after firing a shot. It takes him forever to go from a standstill to a sprint. I got hit many times because the character didn't get moving fast enough. You have to get a feel for him and react sooner than you think. Okay, I've complained enough. Now it's time to talk more about what's great about this game. Enemies. The models of regular zombies are really varied, and it's hard to find 2 identical ones. Although later in the game it's practically copy-paste, you can still spot differences, and this makes sense given the location of the action. However, Capcom really went all out here, and thanks to that, the gameplay experience is even better, because we're constantly experiencing something new. And I'm not just talking about the various models of regular zombies, but also those stronger creatures. When you defeat a zombie, its body doesn't disappear, it becomes a ticking time bomb. After a while, such a corpse can transform into a much stronger zombie, now from the remastered first Resident Evil, the Crimson Head. There are 2 ways to prevent this. Either we inject it with a purple substance that makes it explode, or if we're lucky enough to get a critical hit with a headshot, it will explode on its own, putting a smile on our face. Besides the zombies, we also have boss level enemies, who chase us through specific zones, like Mr. X or Nemesis. The adrenaline might spike temporarily, but usually there's a room just around the corner that they won't enter, so they are more of distraction than a real threat. But wait, I am not complaining about them again. I think such enemies are essential in games. They add variety, and above all, we have to adapt to changing situations, which is where they shine. And speaking of scares, I got jump scared twice, because a creature jumped out of the darkness. Is that a lot for me? I am not usually easy scared, so I think so. Someone with weaker nerves might get scared, especially when playing as Grace. People with arachnophobia will also find their moment of fear, though there are already mods available to address this. Alright, let's move on to crafting. The game places a very heavy emphasis on crafting items, adding supplies, ammunition and upgrades. To craft items we need scrap metal and blood. It's such a strange process. I have no idea what kind of manufacturing process requires blood to make pistol bullets. We collect it with a special syringe from buckets scattered around the facility, or from dead zombies. Despite the strange decision to use blood, this system is actually really fun to use. I also add that only Grace uses blood, Leon uses gunpowder, just as God intended. Difficulty level. I played on the hardest setting available from the start of the game. It was pretty okay. I died a few times and sometimes I had to get creative because I was running out of ammo for my favorite weapon. But there were plenty of ink ribbons. I never needed to create new ones, and this difficulty level was supposed to be harder due to the limited number of saves. After completing it, we unlock a harder level, and here it's a wild ride. The beginning of the adventure is really hard. We don't have any weapons, and once we get one, we often have barely a few rounds of ammo. You really have to be creative and carefully craft items to survive. Steam Deck Corner. I run the game on medium and high settings, and sometimes even my old eyes could catch a few FPS drops. It wasn't frequent and mainly happened during cutscenes. Otherwise it was playable, and to be honest, I thought I'd have to drop down to the lowest settings. If you want ultra smooth gameplay even on this hardware, there's plenty to tweak to eliminate these drops. This is a more demanding title, so the battery drains quickly. In just under 30 minutes of play, I used up 20% of the battery on the OLED version of the Steam Deck. So if you're traveling by plane or don't have a way to charge, you will have enough battery for about 3 hours of play. And the controls? If you're used to playing shooters with a controller, you will feel right at home, especially since you can enable aim assist. In my opinion, the game has a lot of pros, but it's not perfect either. I think a 4 out of 5 is a fair rating. I consider Requiem one of the best Resident Evil games. By switching between the two characters, we experience two distinct gameplay styles. The story presented to us is interesting, and the gameplay systems are a lot of fun. We get the feeling of being a badass veteran as Leon, slaughtering one creature after another, and the adrenaline rushes as we sneak through the zombies as Grace. Unfortunately, it fell a bit short of a 5. The story doesn't stand out from the other games in the series, and the systems I mentioned aren't fully developed enough to really shine. I can recommend this title to Resident Evil fans with a clear conscience. For everyone else, I recommend starting your adventure with a series by playing the remake of the second game. Of course, nothing is stopping you from playing Requiem. Prior knowledge of the story isn't required to have a good time here, but without familiarity with the previous games, you will miss out on the significant dose of positive emotions. I've beaten the game twice and I opt for another playthrough, because the game is really good. That's all for today. Be well.